Our policy, for the moment, is to conceal ourselves. Of course, this has not always been so. We are really faced with a cruel dilemma. When the humans disbelieve in our existence, we lose all the pleasing results of direct terrorism, and we make no magicians. On the other hand, when they believe in us, we cannot make them materialists and skeptics, at least not yet. I have great hopes that we shall learn in due time how to emotionalize and mythologize their science to such an extent that what is, in effect, belief in us, though not under that name, will creep in while the human mind remains closed to belief in the enemy. The life force, the worship of sex, and some aspects of psychoanalysis may here prove useful if once we can produce our perfect work, the materialist, magician, the man not using but veritably worshiping what he vaguely calls forces, while denying the existence of spirits. Then the end of the war will be in sight. Well, I don't know about you guys, but I'm worried now. I'm really worried. So they were talking in the background while I was doing that reading. They were talking about like actual demons. Oh my goodness. What are we going to do? Okay, I suppose I just should introduce our guest. How's that? That's right. So we warned him. That, you know, we do things unconventionally on the Mosaic Ark here. We are willing to talk about angels and demons and mythologizing science and magic and materialists. And so we are very, very honored to welcome John Daniel Davidson to the Mosaic Ark tonight. This is Evita's fault. we spread our gratitude and blame liberally. No, so we had Evita on several weeks ago, and John is her colleague at the Federalist. Has been writing there how long? Many years. You've been writing there many years.
Since 2016.
Oh, the 8 years. Oh my gosh, that's a significant 8 years. 2016. So.
Yeah, it is.
we could just derail and go. Have we been in a time warp? Are we back there now? Like, is it going to happen again, all over again? Oh, we may. I mean, okay. So when Evita was on, she told us about your book, which we have, Pagan America. And we realized you've been writing the same thing we have. So we had to have you on.
True. Yeah.
Good.
It was a bit freaky.
No, but really.
I'm glad I'm not the only one.
No, it was.
We're noticing too.
Very spooky, right? That we've been. I don't know how much you know about us, so we'll just introduce ourselves now. That we've been working for the last 3 years now on a poem about exactly this problem that you've described here. This tension between the diabolic and the Christian. And we've been writing it in sort of mythological form in poetry, very much inspired by Lewis and Tolkien and such. And so we're very grateful for you for writing the version that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's all I was capable of is just prose. I'm not a poet.
I don't know. It's if you can actually make it make sense, maybe we hopefully are showing something that is truly happening. But it was a real pleasure reading the book after Evita told us. I think she told us right before it had released, right? So we read it hot off the press, and saying you have been tracking, I mean, literally exactly the same kind of forces and stories and hauntings that we've been watching ourselves. And so we're very, very happy to have you here to tell us about your journey through this horrible landscape.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to talk with you, and I'm glad to know that what I wrote was already on some people's minds. It had been percolating in my mind for a while, and it was only some outside prompting that got me to write the book in the first place. Honestly,
how did you get to end up writing on this topic? Because we say like the Virgin Mary tells us to do stuff and the Holy Spirit, and we don't no, the thing is we just like,
we said with humility.
We say with humility.
No,
and,
I mean,
you know,
I wish I was that far along. So I'm not there yet. I hope that the Holy Spirit and Our Lady will tell me to do stuff in the future, and I'll have ears to hear.
You're here now.
Yeah, I mean, right. I through a twisted road, I got here. So what happened was I went and saw this film called The Northman that came out a couple years back. It was a Viking revenge epic set in pre-Christian Scandinavia, and it's a very violent film. It's not very enjoyable to watch, actually, but it is captivating because of how raw and brutal and realistic it portrays pagan Nordic society, right? Just prior to the arrival of the Catholic monks who would eventually convert all of Scandinavia. And watching this film, I went to see it with my brother-in-law, and afterwards we couldn't stop talking about it, about how the director and the screenwriter unintentionally made a case for Christianity over paganism, just in how visceral and raw this depiction of the pagan world, and not just the pagan world, like the physical aspect of the pagan world, but the pagan ethos, the pagan worldview and cosmology that the film conveyed was very powerful. And I started, and so I wrote a review of it for the Federalist, and then I started writing. That spring went into summer, and summer came along, and there was Pride everywhere that June. Gay pride was everywhere. And so I wrote a column about how Christians need to reclaim the month of June for the Sacred Heart of Jesus, and for the Feast of Corpus Christi, and assert that we have ownership and have had ownership over the month of June, that the new pagans don't. And so all of this prompted an editor at Regnery to reach out to me and suggest that I turn these columns into a book-length treatment of what happens as Christianity fades and paganism returns in the West. And that was the genesis of the book. And I honestly never thought anyone would ask me to write a book about that.
Well, this is what we mean by, we're nudged, right? It's more.
Yeah.
But I say I've been working on, writing about devotion to the Virgin Mary for decades now, and I do tend to describe it as kicking and screaming. Right? It's like in academia, I really should be writing about all sorts of other things, gender, right? If I were writing about the Virgin Mary, I should be writing about gender, and I should be writing about, queering the Song of Songs and things like that. No, Our Lady says you have to write this, and I don't get any ideas other than that. So it sounds like you got nabbed too.
Yeah, I honestly, I was like, I didn't think anyone would ask me to write a book about this, but when I was asked, it was like immediately I was like, yes, if I can pull it off. And I didn't know if I could, But there was, I thought I would be, kind of suckered into writing a book about politics or the border or something more quotidian. But I was asked to write about this, and it's what I had sort of like it had been percolating for a while. This idea, like, well, what happens when the West, which was created by the Christian faith, what happens when Western civilization loses its religion and becomes non-Christian? What, practically speaking, what can we expect? Well, one of the things, to go back to the quote, the C.S. Lewis quote that you opened us with, we can expect the devils to come back, and we can expect them to come in new forms and new guises that will appeal to a modern post-Christian mind. And that's what I try to sort of give the outlines of in the book, of how that's happening and what forms that's taking.
So I'd say,
I think
sorry.
I think there's quite a few people being called to write about this topic in both fiction and nonfiction. When you describe the Northman, which I haven't seen yet, sounds like I kind of want to see him. It sounded very similar to Apocalypto. He shows the pagan society in Mexico right before the Spanish arrived. And their worldview, their ethos, and they didn't have it. I mean, they even showed, a sensitive scene where a man is watching his son die, and he's obviously distraught, even though he and his son are both vile murderers. They're collecting fodder for the Aztec priests to sacrifice. That kind of fascinates me, that it's on so many people's radars. And yes, we should not be surprised one bit when the demons notice that we're noticing and start getting more active.
So what I was thinking is, on the one hand, I think, John, you are both more optimistic and pessimistic than we are, and we are more pessimistic and optimistic than you are. In exactly the reverse way.
We're in extremes.
Well,
way?
no. I've listened to you talk to several people and talk about what the arc of your story is, and it was that there was a time when we weren't enslaved to all the demons, and that we were losing Christianity, and so we're coming into this I do agree we're in the post-Christian paganism, which I think is a different thing than pre-Christian paganism, but I want to bracket that. So that there was a time in which it felt like the demonic was being held at bay, whereas you see us going into this period. We in the Mosaic Ark take exception to the use of the term Dark Ages. Usually, because wait a minute, no. Yes. But from the other direction, that the poem that we've been working on in our Draco Alchemicus is in fact about how the demons have been with us all along, right? That they're if you want a golden age, it was like, right before that incident with the tree and the snake. And that
I agree with that.
History is actually entwined all along with the temptations that the demons are putting to us. However, more optimistic in that we do, I think actually may probably agree with us, the politicians have gotten to you, that we're actually we're saved, right? We're in a world that has been actually redeemed, and it's a different kind of problem now, not just post-Christianity, but post-Christ, right? We're in AD. This is the year of our Lord. Mm-hmm. So do you say that the optimism and pessimism can go different directions? Like, are we falling away from a culture or a civilization that we had and are losing, or are we simply in the same fight that we've been in all along, and will we win or not?
Well, we forgot who we are.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah. It's a good distinction. And I agree with everything you're saying here. I if I have represented myself to believe that, or to say that there was a time when we had sort of defeated the demons, or we were living without their pernicious influence, I may have misspoken or just misrepresented my views. I don't think paganism ever went away. So one of the premises of the book, and I mentioned this in the podcast I did with Andrew Willard Jones, which, Rachel, I think you said you listened to,
is
that the only...
You all were both at Hillsdale.
Yes.
Yeah, that was a really, you guys
Yes.
should listen to that one. We're going to do different things than they did because they did that one.
Yeah. So I consulted him on some of the history of the book. He's a medievalist at the Franciscan University there in Steubenville. We started our conversation talking about how their only alternative to Christianity is paganism, and that paganism never really went away, right? It's always there, and anywhere Christianity recedes, paganism kind of comes flooding back in different, and it takes different forms depending on the people and the culture and the era, right? In the time of Saint Boniface, all up and down the Frankish frontier, there were peoples who the Franks had thought had been converted generations before. And when St. Boniface and his company kind of went through, they were going through that area to get to the Germans that were sort of deeper in Germania, that were the true pagans who had never been proselytized before. And what he found was a bunch of sort of backsliding Christians that paganism had come surging back. And this is a pattern that repeats itself. Wherever Christianity doesn't sufficiently take root and there isn't a complete conversion of the people, they revert to a pre-Christian mode. And the question for us now is yes, we're living in AD, we're living in the post-Christ era, but as a culture, the West at least is entering this novel epoch where we are shedding the religion and the faith that gave rise to our civilization. And so what happens to that civilization in this context, in the context of a once Christian people rejecting the faith? What happens to their civilization? What does paganism look like after Christianity, right?
Right. And
after Christendom.
That is where I was so excited to have your book, because you're saying it so bluntly and so precise, like crisply. It's like, it's Christ or Satan. That's it.
Right.
Right. And one of the traps that, modern history of religion studies has fallen into, thanks to things that have happened in Chicago since 1893 because of the World Council of Religions and the Divinity School here and things like that, is we've learned to talk about religion as if it's a plural, right? It's like there are religions and there's different, traditions and things like that, as if there's different options, right? It's like, well, you have this option and that option and this option. It's like, no, that's insane, because it's saying there's this reality and that reality and that reality, and take your pick with this idea. I think people are lying when they do that, because they don't believe in multiple realities.
Or maybe they believe in nothing, right? The people that would promote this, because like you say, there can't be multiple realities. There can't be my truth and your truth. Truth exists on its own. So for people to say, well, there are different truths, it's like, well, no, there's different beliefs. That's different. That's different than to say there's different religions and different realities. Some people are wrong, in other words, but nobody wanted to come out and say it.
It's a binary, right? It's not. There's not this multiplicity of normative ontological claims about man and the universe. It's a binary. You either are with God and you recognize that God is God and you are his creature and he is the creator, or you're with the devil, who says you will not surely die and you will be as God, right?
Exactly.
And that's the story that's the paganism. That's the pagan side of it, right? And it's at war forever with the Christian side.
Yes. And this is what we got some pictures to help us here, and it's like to talk through this problem of people are going to be already either delighted or triggered depending on who's watching, right?
I think a lot of people get triggered. I mean, I don't know about people watching here, but nobody likes to make a choice, right? I can remember when George Bush said, "You're either with us or with the terrorists," and I thought, well, that seems pretty reasonable, but it triggered so many people when he said that. Everybody wanted to see gray in between. And maybe there was in that situation, but it was just illustrative of the way people think today in modern America, that they want lots of gray.
Yes, it's thought to be sophisticated to think in gray tones rather than black and whites or binaries. The the reality is, as you know, you're either, that either you're either with us or against us. People don't like to hear that. Christians don't even like to
No,
hear that.
no.
Partly because they've become accustomed to thinking that the supernatural stuff is kind of unsophisticated. It's kind of embarrassing to talk
Mm-hmm.
about or to admit that you believe in that stuff, supernatural, metaphysical stuff. And so they want to downplay it. They want to, so they come up with these elaborate theories about how, in the age of the apostles, there was demonic possessions and stuff, and that just doesn't happen anymore. The reality is, I think, as modern people who sort of like, who kind of all were raised in this sort of secular materialist society, we just have lost the language to talk about this, and we've lost like the ability to see it. Even
Yes.
something like, and I'm no exmenology or anything like that, and don't purport to be, but I can tell you that the idea that there are no demon possessed people in the world today is totally wrong. They're actually everywhere, and we've lost the ability to even describe what it is that we see all around us, to kind of to ourselves what's happening.
And if you listen to Exorcists, it's increasing,
Yeah.
not decreasing.
Huge demand.
It's not even staying steady.
Right.
It's increasing.
Yep. Yeah.
Well, in the term, so that, yes, the passage that I read at the beginning is C.S. Lewis's Screwtape Letters, right?
Right.
And Screwtape is explaining to Wormwood how they work. And this, you often use this image that he describes the materialist magician, that we're going to that, but that we're going to emotionalize and mythologize their science to make them into the kind of, I mean, things about the life force. It's like, it's wild that he's writing this obviously in the 40s, right? 1942. And we have an entire movie, what is it called? Franchise about the force, right? We've right.
And
he was influenced
what grabbed
by
me,
Campbell a lot.
What grabbed me about that passage, and it's such a great passage, and was really, to me, almost conceptually like a key that kind of unlocked what I was trying to say, is that the whole point there is to create a new kind of man whose mind is closed to belief in God, and they would never consciously say, I believe in God, or that I pray, or that I do anything like worship, and that's how the deception comes in. That's how the devils ensnare modern secular materialist man, is to keep their mind closed to anything like faith or worship or prayer or belief in God, and at the same time get them to open themselves to the idea of spiritual forces that maybe they can tap into, maybe they can leverage. Right? That's how they get you. There's your quote reminded me of there's another quote, if I may, from Lewis's Screwtape Letters, from the preface, that's very germane to this. He says there are two equal and opposite errors into which our race can fall about the devils. One is to disbelieve in their existence. The other is to believe and to feel an excessive and unhealthy interest in them. They themselves, the devils, are equally pleased by both errors and hail a materialist or a magician with the same delight. And that together with the quote that you read that's in the book, I think explains just almost as a key or as a rubric, explains so much of what we see. So much so that I kept, through that chapter, I kept using it as saying, like, here's a materialist magician in the news. Here's a materialist magician who has been profiled by the Atlantic or Time Magazine or the Washington Post. Here they are. They're here, and they're and everything that Lewis said has come to pass in ways that he would have probably surprised him how on the nose he was with that passage.
One of them, it's like, I got some pictures. It's very easy to find all these things on the internet, and I'm reading through your book and going, I want to find this one. No, it's like collect all of them, right? All these witches, right? That you said that one of them that you have profiled. The profile in the chapter is this young woman, a teenager, who's a witch, right? And so it's the October puff piece on the teenage witch, which certainly we've grown. Well, we grew up with Bewitched and Genie and that goes into, I think the millennials have the cult, right? That there's all of this, witches of Eastwick, all of this media interest in witches and who they are and such like that, and you can have it playing out as if, well, here's our meme, right? Is your child being lured into witchcraft? Know the warning signs. And then all of these things that, witchcraft is said to be nature worship and quite, peaceful and everything. Praying for peace, honoring nature, taking part in healing ceremonies, loving animals, hope for the future, believing in racial and gender equality, not wanting to hurt anyone, building a better world, having no patience with bigots. Right? And it's that kind. I mean, it's like Screwtape is grinning throughout all of this, saying yes, that we've taught them to embrace these practices of spells and self-affirmations and tapping into forces and such like that. And as far as they think they're doing, it's all this, it's self-help and peaceful and nature worshiping. And you talk about how that they're kidding themselves.
Yeah, one phrase to describe that way of practicing witchcraft would be to modify Rod Dreher's term from the Benedict option when he described moral therapeutic deism.
Right.
This is sort of moral therapeutic witchcraft or moral therapeutic paganism, which is closely tied, especially in young people, to these progressive kind of left-wing bromides. And to feminism, to identity politics, and to various causes, right?
Mm-hmm.
But to me, from the devil's point of view, those are just ruses to get them in, to get them comfortable with conversing with these devils,
Mm-hmm.
right? One of the things you mentioned earlier, Kimberly, the demand for exorcists has gone through the roof, right?
Mm-hmm.
over the past decade or two, and along with that, there's a lot more podcasts where exorcists talk about what they do nowadays, and so there's you can kind of find out a little bit more than you used to be able to. And one of the things that exorcists routinely say is, that people should not talk to these creatures, right? Don't talk to them, even to sort of like, argue with them or denounce them. Like, unless you're an exorcist, don't talk to them. It's dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
I think those kind of like political and cultural causes that are attached to moral therapeutic paganism nowadays are ruses. They're tricks to get people into conversations with these devils, because the young woman who I mentioned, who was profiled by the Washington Post in the book, her and her boyfriend, they both have these sort of, gods and goddesses, demons that they have taken on as their familiars. I think the young woman's familiar was Hecate, and her boyfriend was devoted to Odin, right? Now, those are names for real beings, that really exist, and have been around forever, and entering into conversation and entering into dialogue and participating in works with those creatures is very dangerous, and they're getting kind of suckered into it through the most idiotic political propaganda, thinking that this is like feminist empowerment, or this is like this is political empowerment, And so it's a ruse, and it's the kind of ruse, as you said, Rachel, earlier, that would have made Screwtape smile from ear to ear.
Oh, he's totally. So what we need to do, I think, is convince people that what you just said is real. Right. It's like we're talking about demons and we're saying that they are in fact working through people and seducing them and such, and maybe our audience is already on board and has read Screw Tape Letters, and so they're already worried. Mel says in the comments that Screw Tape Letters gave me wicked nightmares. So anybody who's read Screw Tape, I can't finish it because it's so terrifying, because you start
It's really
recognizing,
good.
yeah, you start recognizing all of the moves that they
Well,
make.
I think that the creep factor, I didn't find it totally creepy, but I could see why people would, because he was so reasonable when he was
Mhm.
Yes.
describing how they should infiltrate the human race. It was just so calm and
The devil is very rational.
yes,
Yes, and
That's
that's
one of
very,
the things.
the devil is very, very like hyper rational.
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that these exorcists often say as well, when they do interviews or podcasts, is that these creatures are smarter than you.
Yes.
They're smarter than all of us. Don't talk to them. They'll trick you. they'll
Yes.
they'll lie to you and deceive you and get you to do things that you don't want. Maybe you don't want to do.
Right.
But don't talk to them, because they are smarter than you and they will manipulate you.
I have even met Christians who are not exorcists. One of them's a woman; she's not even a priest. Who said they do exorcisms. I said, you shouldn't be doing that. He says, no, I can do that. The Bible says I can do that. I said, I don't think you understand how
Yeah.
powerful these things are. You're in danger. You should not be
Yeah.
doing that. And they like, they don't take it seriously.
Oh.
It's they don't know enough about it. Like these
They're
people
not
that know.
doing exorcisms. That,
No,
like,
they're
you
just calling
mean?
attention to them. Yeah, around them is what they're doing.
Yeah.
Okay, so we need to give people some advice on how to spot the way these things work. Don't be talking to them. I mean, one of the things that we've done for Draco Alchemicus is we have read a lot of history of magic, and we've read about John Dee, and we know about his trying to talk to angels. The angels don't do what you think. I mean, it's like angels don't do that, right? You can't trap an angel in a
Right.
sickle. And if you get any being that is
Yeah,
claiming to be
yeah.
bound by the sickle, guess what? It's not an angel.
And they don't do party
And they don't do
tricks. They
party
don't just
tricks,
show up
right?
when you're on
But
command.
there are ways. But the thing is, what is interesting, which I think Boniface, the way Boniface dealt with all of those pagans was very, very simple. He spent his life doing this, right?
Mm-hmm.
That you make the sign of
Yeah,
the cross and they flee, and that is in his life, in the saints' lives. That's very, very powerful. They make the sign of the cross and they flee. So you do have a weapon against them, but
Mm-hmm.
it's in Christ. But there are also telltale signs, and I thought you and this. I think you're quoting here from the Lipscomb. Is she the author of the? No, she's a. You'll have to tell me who your source is. She's talking about why people are drawn to witchcraft, right? The women, right? And with this paradoxical thing of witches are women who wield power but are also oppressed victims who have no power. There's an interesting
Mm-hmm.
sort of trick in that is the why you could tell it's post-Christian trickery.
Mm-hmm.
But she's
that's total feminism, right there in a
well,
nutshell.
it's how do you? I mean, it's subverting Christ, right? It's like he's the victim, he's the sacrifice. So if you're the victim,
That too.
right? It's like it
Oh,
plays
right.
off of
Become your
people's
own god.
yes, right. But the way she said
Mm-hmm.
she's saying here, John, you're quoting her. I think the rise in people identifying as witches might come from a combination of factors. Not only does witchcraft promise you the mystical power to change your life, it always comes down to power, and you
Mm-hmm.
point to that regularly.
Mm-hmm.
But in the same breath, calling oneself a witch claims victim status. They are trying to claim, and this is what the whole victimology thing is. It's like this is how Christians get trapped by it, right? These people show themselves as weak and victim, and that it's to claim power over you. Like, wait a minute, no.
Mm-hmm.
Christ is the victim. He surrenders to the cross and is not trying to wield power over you by way of that. He's giving, well, anyway, it's a trick, right? You see the trick
Well,
there?
and absolutely, and in sort of in the modern context of sort of like, progressive or leftist ideology, being a victim is an avenue of
Right.
power, right? Like, there's a hierarchy of victimhood, and the more victimized you are, the more privileged your status is, right? And so you have, which is why you can end up with these sort of like almost contradictory, mutually exclusive claims, existing in the same person or in the same ideology of saying, oh, well, I'm a woman with no power, and I'm a victim, but I'm also like a witch with power, and I'm drawing on my victim status to enhance my power and project it into the world on behalf of my will, right?
All of that, yeah.
And and so that's the other theme that kind of comes up over and over, is this idea that of power and will and coercion, and that those are the watchwords of the pagan order, right? And they're the inverse of the Christian ethos, right? And you see that all, you see that with these teenage witches, right? But you see that in other ways too, that this inversion of Christian values and principles expressing itself in through will and force and coercion and desire,
Right.
too. Desire for power and the wielding of power. That's a common theme that runs throughout.
Yeah, I'm thinking of that now called The Secret, which isn't exactly witchcraft, but the same concept. It was, if your will is strong enough, you can bring things to yourself, which is magic.
Right? Constantly.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So how do we? So this is like the little version of things is in this, the witchcraft, or these self-help things, and but then your premise, that John, that you're trying to show us, is how this leads, there is a straight path from here to what we recognize as actual paganism. So maybe we need to talk about, like, you open, we're actually, guys, we're starting the middle of the book, but the beginning is actually giving us an actual history of what ancient paganism looks like. And it's interesting that you said you came to writing the book because of the Northman movie. Did you get the sense that people watching the movie enjoyed the fact that these guys were super violent?
I don't know. I didn't enjoy it. It wasn't like a fun movie to watch. It was captivating. It was arresting. But I think that we give short shrift to the violence and brutality of the pagan world today. There's been probably since the Enlightenment romanticized, antiquity, in really kind of embarrassing ways, right? This idea, this sort of like gauzy view of the pagan past, of, togas and leisurely Roman aristocrats lounging around, and it's just sort of this, this like golden age syndrome about the Roman Empire or about ancient Greece, right, when in reality, like, these were slave societies. Most people were slaves. They didn't have, and they had no rights. The ruling class could do whatever they wanted to anyone who was in a lower station than them. And this is the pattern that repeats itself across time and geography and cultures. All of these pagan societies are incredibly violent, and the more advanced they are, the more violent and brutal they become. So something like the ancient Egypt or the Aztecs, right, which we talked about, or the Carthaginians, or the Babylonians. Human sacrifice and child sacrifice are ubiquitous across time and space and culture, and that's where. So to set the stage at the beginning of the book, I talk about the cosmology of the ancient Near East, and how the account of the ancient Hebrews, the ancient Israelites, didn't depart from it so much as corrected aspects of it, but these were universal beliefs, right? That there was a body of divine beings that governed the world, right? And that there was a Most High God, and that there was a son of this Most High God. And in many accounts, the son of the Most High, there was a rebellion in heaven, and he overthrew God, right? And so the Israelites corrected that, and they said, yes, there is a council that governs the earth. There is a Most High God, and the Most High God does have a son. But there wasn't a rebellion, and the rebellion in heaven wasn't of the Son against the Father. And the rebellion, such as it was, failed. And the beings that rebelled against God are here now. They've been cast down, and now they're here. And that's who your gods are, you pagan peoples. You're worshiping those beings, and they are lesser than the Most High God. They're not the true God. And that became the whole, the premise and the identity of the Jewish people was built around that corrective to what was a pretty uniform cosmology of the ancient, Near East when it came to explaining the world.
Well, this fits.
A convoluted way of putting it. It's much clearer in the book.
The book is very clear, and I'm scrambling you up because I'm pushing on different edges of things. But what you're saying is exactly what we've been talking about in other contexts. It's like the Trinity's in the Old Testament.
Yes.
Which is important. And also that what we've talked about in previous episodes is what you're describing is the actual temple worship of Jerusalem, and we're going to get to that, right? We have slides to get to that tonight, but that the worship of God in the temple was a recognition of his ability to become present through the worship and enthroned in the ark, and and taking human form too, right? So that there's the confusing part about all of this. I think this is one of the things we wanted to get to tonight was talking about how do you tell the difference between one of these demons and Christ? Because the manifestation of the presence in the temple is of light and of like when Daniel sees him or when Ezekiel sees him, it's a figure of a man enthroned on the chariot. With the 4 living creatures and things like that. These are terrifying images potentially, and I mean our worry as Christians is always not being sucked into Lucifer's deception, right? Who might appear as an angel of light and promise stuff to us, which is what the demons do, right? In the they're developing their cults. They promise things to people. They give you gifts. They promise you power.
Yes, absolutely.
Same old.
Right.
From the ancient world to today. I'm going to do white magic spells. I'll get what I want. This is a love potion.
Always.
I know the secret.
Always.
I'll just want it badly enough, and it will come to me. I'm just going to put my signals out to the universe. Right, not a sentient being. But the universe is going to provide things for me. It's the force.
But it's what you were saying. It's like this. All of the ancient peoples understand this reality, and the temptation. I mean, the Hebrews fall into it regularly, right? They're constantly falling into worshiping the demons, and then the prophets have to come along and say, "Stop it."
Yeah, no. So why would that be, right?
Indeed.
Like, why
are they so appealing? How do you end up sacrificing your children?
Why are they so appealing?
Yes.
Right. Why is it that the Hebrews are so quick to fall back into paganism? It's not just a weird hobby that they liked to do. They kept falling back into it because there was real power there, and there were real goods that they could obtain from these creatures, right? And the pagan peoples, of the ancient Near East understood this, and they did get things from these creatures, right? This was, and I talk about this in the book, that in the antediluvian world, it's alluded to in the Old Testament, but it's corroborated by other ancient sources, that there were these advisors, and there were these non-human creatures that were able to confer power and knowledge, secret knowledge, to kings and rulers who swore fealty to them and offered sacrifices to them. And so there was, it wasn't just like all these pagan peoples didn't just, have like these complex societies and bureaucracies and militaries and, these massive urban centers and temple and palace complexes. And then on the side, unrelated to all that, they did these weird pagan rituals. That's, and I think that we fall into that way of thinking, as though it was like, oh, they were stupid. That's why they did that.
Yeah,
they weren't stupid. These were highly advanced societies with advanced bureaucracies and agriculture and military, complexes. These weren't simple people, and so we had kind of condescend to them. And we do so, I think, out of it's a failure of imagination, of like religious imagination, to just dismiss their pagan rituals and think, why did they do it at all? Why did they sacrifice people? Why did they sacrifice children? Why did all of them sacrifice children? And why was this such a temptation for the Israelites to fall back into, especially when they fell on hard times, especially when the going got rough? Because there were real material goods that pagan peoples got from worshiping devils. And I'm sorry if that makes people uncomfortable, but it's true. It's true. And it's also true what you said earlier. And I don't get into this in the book, but, the development of I should say the lack of development of something like the doctrine of the Trinity, it was already there in Second Temple Judaism. That's why nobody in the New Testament ever talked about it. The second person of the hypostasis of Yahweh, right, or that it was understood as that was Yahweh's incarnate form when Yahweh appeared in the burning bush, when he appeared with the two angels to Abraham. That was something that the ancient Israelites understood, that there was a second person in Yahweh who was able to manifest himself in the physical world. And anyway, maybe that's a tangent.
That's directly where we're going.
Okay.
and that's why. So one, what you're talking about is like these peoples have very complex societies and giant cities and commerce and trade and government and such. And Casey mentioned Apocalypto. Well, now on screen is showing a scene from that movie, right? And that we hear in the Mosaic Ark, Stan Mel Gibson, one for the Passion of the Christ, which is also in our mind tonight. But the Apocalypto shows everything that you're describing amazingly well, which is that in the sacrifice. Do you know the movie? Have you seen Apocalypto? Yeah.
Oh, yes.
So
awesome.
in the scene when they're doing the sacrifice of the men who they've captured, the warriors, to bring them to they're feeding the sun, right? And it's that what's interesting about I think the ending of Apocalypto is complicated because the Spanish show up with their ships with the crosses on them. It's like, oh, here comes Christianity. And that's Leopard Paw does not want to go towards the Spanish. The other guys do.
Jaguar Paw.
Same beast. Come on. I'm translating differently. So it's not really clear that Gibson, who is obviously also Catholic, means to say Catholicism comes and ends all of this, because there's, but what's very clear in the sacrificial scene is that sacrificial system is us, right? The guy, the priest giving his speech to the people in the square saying, if we need to do this sacrifice because then we will be prosperous. And I'm like, where do we hear that every single election year? Oh, right. I mean, it's like, to me, it's a straight up an allegory or analogy with all of the kinds of promises of power and control and prosperity that sacrificial systems. You can see the people I'm showing the crowd in the picture, right? They love it. They're there watching these young men have their hearts cut out and their bodies, rolled down the steps over and over and over again. They're not rebelling against it, going, oh, it's horrible and gross. mean, that's the hard thing to get
Right.
your mind around. It's like when the Spanish see this human sacrifice with cannibalism and everything, they're, horrified, and they whitewash the temples and put up statues of Mary and hope to convert people. But the people watching it at the time aren't horrified. They think it's necessary.
That was the heart of it. Yeah, it was the attitude of the people, that they weren't horrified by it was in itself horrifying.
Right. And I think what Gibson, when the young men are when they're getting painted blue before they go onto the platform, and they're saying we need to die courageously, and I'm like, this is like every single soldier that's been sent into battle for the sake of these demons.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And the people themselves are not horrified by it because they've become habituated to it, and because they in their minds these atrocities are, in some ways justified, right? However, whatever qualms they may have for it, the good that comes is greater than the cost of the sacrifice. And that was true even in like cynical pagan empires, like the Roman Empire, which didn't have human sacrifice in the same way, but it did have the Colosseum, which was a form of human sacrifice for the sake of entertaining and placating the masses. And
mass executions also, like on the FBI.
Yeah, absolutely, and a way to mass execute in a crowd-pleasing manner.
They were actually,
right?
Now happily we got to this. I'm showing now a mosaic of some of the gladiatorial games as compared with the skull racks that the Aztecs set up.
Mm-hmm.
The industrial scale of it
on both sides.
Right.
It's like you have these giant empires. Somehow they end up with these sacrificial systems. The gladiatorial games were actually, this is in some of the 1950s movies, like I think like Quo Vadis, or maybe it's The Robe. There's scenes where the emperor is there's now I can't remember which one it is. There's a song to one of the deities before the games opened. They were intended as the Romans had those gladiatorial games as sacrifices. They straight up were offerings to the gods, and they were.
And some of the sacrifices that the Aztecs carried out were gladiatorial-like as well. One of the things that I learned on a visit to Mexico City, which I didn't realize that I went to Mexico City many times over the past 6 years for unrelated work. Only realized when I came to write the book that it was part of the preparation for writing the book. The big dials, like the mosaic sort of sundials that you see, that are very, very, very famous images of Templo Mayor in Mexico City, that are synonymous with like the Aztec temple. Those weren't up on the wall, or they weren't vertical. They were horizontal, and they were meant. Many of them were meant as a sacrificial platform, and two warriors would be put on that, and they would have to fight to the death. And there was, there's almost no room to move on that. So it was a gladiatorial contest that was happening on the temple grounds itself. Sometimes multiple ones happening at the same time. So there was a kind of gladiatorial aspect to the Aztec human sacrifices as well. But to your point, Rachel, there were no less. They very consciously were doing this as a ritualistic human sacrifice, just like with an element of sport thrown in. Right,
it was a spectacle.
Right. Yes.
Like people watching a hanging, like it was something to do, which is
right,
incomprehensible to the modern mind, I think.
Except it's not, and that's really John's point.
A spectacle?
Comprehensible. I think we can get resensitized to it quickly.
No, I think so too.
Because we've desensitized ourselves to things like abortion, right?
Right.
And desensitize ourselves to things like euthanasia, that have this sort of antiseptic veneer to them, but are really brutal and really violent practices that are more widespread in terms of scale than anything that the Aztecs or the Romans came up with. And we're moving quickly from that into these kind of ritualistic mutilations that we see in the trans movement that are themselves a kind of a ritualistic spectacle.
Which was
And
done in ancient Rome as well, right?
Mhm.
Public castrations, self-castrations for certain
Right.
cults. Yeah.
Yeah.
For the
Yep.
Great Mother,
Absolutely.
the galley for Sibylle.
Mhm.
Yeah, and they castrate themselves in procession.
Yep. It was a religious procession.
So I think that we maybe
A pride
overestimate.
parade.
Right. We sometimes maybe
Had to go there.
overestimate our aversion to these things. Like I think that we are resensitizing ourselves with these things as we move into this kind of new pagan society, and as we shed the Christian faith. I think there's the appetite literally like the increase, and that's why you see, and I've talked about this plenty about in other interviews about the book, how the rhetoric around abortion has changed. Right? There's anymore. It's a positive good. It's something to be proud of. It's something that is necessary, in fact, to vindicate the constitutional rights and the human rights of all women. This violence practice is not just something that is like an unfortunate reality that we have to tolerate. It's something that we absolutely need, and so I think we're going to begin to see those kinds of changes in the way we talk about these things, and the justifications and the rationales for them that's going to accelerate. I think, so and it's not going to take a long time.
When Roe versus Wade was eliminated by the Supreme Court last year, there was a group of young celebrities, actors. I don't know what they were, singers. I don't remember who their names were. They're very young, but they were very angry, of course. And the one phrase they said really stuck in my mind. They said, "We were just coming into our power, and it was snatched away from us." And like, that's it right there. That's what it's all about. It's power over another human being, life and death at my hands. Yeah.
Well, I think so. I think it's this one. I think it's more than just power over the baby. I think the demons do reward in certain ways, and we've talked about this directly in some of our work. But it's life, right? It's taking a life. And there's something horrifyingly real about sacrifice, which is the thing that Christianity has a hard time talking about, because we were watching Christ's sacrifice, right? And there's the actual death, but the reality of this is, I mean, it's like the place where it's showing up are in things like Dexter. Did you ever watch that? I watched way too many seasons.
Oh, I couldn't watch it. I watched the first couple ones. It was just too gross.
But it's he's getting this frisson out of killing people who he carefully chooses because they're criminals, right? But the he's that is the sap to the audience's conscience, because what he wants to do is watch them die. Right. And so
I got that immediately. I that's why it was like, he's a serial killer. Who cares if he's choosing bad guys? It's still gross.
Right. Well, that's because you still have a conscience. But so this is going back to John, I want to get to the question of why you think it's accelerating, because I mean, we see it accelerating, but I want to why. I like why questions, right? But I want to go back just a little bit longer to okay, so we've painted this picture of it's horrible. They had gladiatorial games where they, set people up to die. They have, mass sacrifices, and that turn into, in the Aztec context, cannibalism as well. Big feasts served with tomatoes and chilies, according to the Spanish. that really Bernal Diaz describes how all of his companions in the conquista in the conquest of Mexico were served up with tomatoes and chilies when they were killed. That we can get to the point where it feels horrible, and then you'll see, people like they were playing on Twitter today, or X, when I was posting about our stream, saying, oh, well, but those Germanic peoples were forced by the Christians to, at sword point to give up their ancestral worship. And, yes, what they did was become Christians. So they stopped sacrificing people and, hanging them on trees and killing them in wells.
Yeah, how dare you?
Well, no, that was that one of the most horrifying example I found, because I think I was unfamiliar with it. No, the binning crucifixions. That was astonishing. People read that, you'll be horrified. But the example that you got of the children that were killed in the well in the north, that they're not, these Woden worshippers are not just heroically hanging themselves on trees to get runes, right? They're hanging dozens and dozens of men and dogs and horses off of trees, and they're throwing children and dogs and horses down wells.
Yep. Yeah. It's not, why would they do that? Right. It only makes sense. It is ridiculous unless the spiritual world is real, and that the beings that they were being worshipped are real beings, right? And that the power over life and death that you get through sacrificing to these beings is also real. Not, so trying to tie this to our comments about abortion, like, yes, there's the power of the mother killing her unborn child because she is the powerful one, and the unborn child is the one with no power, right? And it's only her will and desire that determines the humanity of the child, right? Or whether or not this child has any rights. But in the context of these pagan, pre-Christian pagan religious rituals and sacrifice rituals, there's a kind of power from atrocity that accrues to a society where this is like a unanimous thing everyone agrees they're going to do, right? The explanations that you hear from academic, like archaeologists and anthropologists, is that, like, oh, these people sacrificed their children because children were the most valuable thing in their society, and so they sacrificed them. And that always seemed like an inch deep analysis. Like, that doesn't make sense. That you would sacrifice your children because they're the most valuable thing. What makes more sense is that you would sacrifice your children because there's something more valuable than your children that you get from sacrificing them. And that is power over life and death, power over the natural world, power over your enemies. And that's what these people were after. So, the sacrifices that we're talking about, the sacrifices of, like, the Vikings in Trelleborg and places like this, it wasn't a few people. It wasn't just like the Aztecs. It's not like these aren't one-off things that happen. They happen at regular intervals. Large numbers of human beings sacrificed at regular intervals all over the world across thousands of years. Why would that be, right? That would only be if there was something that people got from from sacrificing people to these creatures, and what they got was tangible and it was real, and that's the only conclusion I think we can come to if you just engage the historical record, like, not in a condescending way, but sort of taking people's words and actions at face value and sort of believing the history that you're reading, and not sort of trying to condescend to it and explain it away, which I think is how a lot of people engage with history, especially nowadays.
They do, and I don't understand why there's this drive to excuse bad behavior. They don't want to make a value judgment.
Well, they don't,
because the reality is horrifying.
I think so. I've got the Baphomet that goes with the Satanic Temple, and Miss Williams with her statue.
Right.
I mean, this is the
Yes,
thing.
her baby.
The women that which she said, thanks to the abortion, I got my career.
Yeah, she's literally holding this golden statue.
Yeah, so that's a great modern day example. It's not that by killing her child, Michelle Williams just got a sense of empowerment. She got something real and tangible. She got fame and fortune and adulation.
Yep.
She got a whole career, tangible goods that she got through that sacrifice. And I think part of the reason people don't want to take this stuff seriously is because it's shocking and it's horrifying. To contemplate that this is what's been happening through all of human history, and it's happening still.
Well, okay, so but we're shocked and horrified because we're Christian. And that is it's what you were saying, that the justifications for abortion have sort of slid into now. I mean, now we're straight up with, it's a sacrament of women's empowerment. And I mean, it's like ironic, it's such an inversion of saying, it's like women's real power is that you can give birth. Good grief. Like, how do you get to
not that you can kill, because you can give life, and men can't do that.
Well, and not even, I mean, not even against men, right? It's just like
Right.
Men and women participate in bringing forth new life. It's okay. This will sound pathetic and silly, but you mentioned with the woman, the girl who has Hecate as her that
her familiar.
Yeah, the pagans of ancient Greece and Rome would not just offer Hecate a jar with moon water, garlic, and a bay leaf, but would sacrifice dogs to her and then eat them. Okay, that, horrifying, eat the dogs, right? But she also said that she organizes fundraisers for abortion. So she's doing this Hecate sacrifices. It's just not with dogs.
Yes, she is. Does she realize it?
No, I think she probably doesn't, because I don't think this is what it took the Christians to point out. Like, I mean, in antiquity, with it describing the way in which the mother's will is the thing that determines whether or not these babies live. If we tell that about ancient Rome, it was the father who decided it. Oh, that's horrible, right?
Yes.
It's like
right.
that the
father decides it, but when the mother decides it,
it's good.
Yes, right on.
Because matriarchy is so warm and cuddly, and patriarchy is so cold and horrible. But it's famous now that the sewers and water fountains of Rome were filled with babies' bones, because they bring the baby to the father, and if he didn't pick it up, they throw it in the sewer, and the Christians would come along and rescue these abandoned infants, often girls. So that we've got to this place now where the women are saying, it's my will if the baby gets to live. It's literally what the pagan Romans did.
Right.
Yeah.
Up or down.
Absolutely. And the fact that Christians rescued these children was a scandal,
right,
to the Romans. I mentioned, we touched on this in an earlier podcast that I did with my friend Andrew at the University in Steubenville. This notion that the nature of atrocity is that it has to, if you have somebody whose dissents, even if it's one person, it kind of breaks the spell, right? And it becomes an indictable society, which is one of the reasons that the Romans reacted so violently against Christianity, because the Christians rejected everything about the pagan Roman order, about the pagan religion of the Roman Empire. They wouldn't even offer a pinch of incense to Caesar, right? Even when the Romans were begging them, like, you can do it cynically. You don't have to believe that Caesar's divine. We need unanimity,
right.
And I discussed this in the book too, that, in the pre-Christian world, there was a separation between religion and morality. Morality was a function of the state. You had to have the official morality had to be the same for everybody. your religious rituals and your religious rites. There was 1,000 religions in the ancient Roman Empire, and the state didn't care about what you did religiously, right? What they cared was that you practiced, because morality was something that you performed. You practiced the state morality, and you had to offer that pinch of incense to Caesar so that there could be unanimity in the that they would, everyone would agree unanimously that Caesar is a divine being, right? Because it's wrapped up. Paganism was also wrapped up with a political order always, and social control always in every pagan empire. And when the Christians refused to do that, they became intolerable to the Romans.
Well, they're enemies of the state.
They're enemies of the state, exactly. So, it was Christianity that united religion and morality. That what you believed and what you did, were what you believed determined what you did, right? And I think that we're returning to kind of a pre-Christian state of things now, where the mainstream culture or the powers that be in our society today require everyone to perform the public morality, and they don't care what you do in your churches and your home. That's of no concern. But when you come out into the public square, we will offer a pinch of incense to Caesar. You will genuflect to gender ideology and to abortion and gay marriage. And if you don't, then you have to be cast out of polite society, and maybe worse, right? You have to be silenced, because your refusal to participate is an indictment against all of us that we can't let stand. It's a scam.
Masks don't work unless everybody wears them.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, I've heard you say that you came, John, that you came to some of this because of the COVID stuff.
I think the COVID stuff was very clarifying for a lot of people, just about how little our institutions of civil society, our government institutions, how little they care about our consciences, right? Our conscience rights, and how willing they are to sort of, put the screws to us with the blunt force of the state and the police power, to make us conform to what they want us to do. That was, at least for me, was eye-opening.
Why do you say so? We'll go to the drag queens now. That this is just going to keep increasing. Why do you think that is happening?
I think because because Christianity is receding in society. There are fewer Christians now than there were before, and the Christians themselves, and it's not just a decline in the quantity of Christians, but the quality of Christian faith is also degrading as people give into heresies and introduced heresy, and don't train their children up in the faith, and don't really care if their children adopt their faith, and faith is seen as something that's they sort of embrace the pagan ideals of relativism and subjectivity, that the religious faith, the Christian faith, maybe that they profess, isn't universal. It's not for everybody. If you don't believe it, that's okay. Whatever you believe is okay for you.
It sounds very Roman. It does.
Yeah, and as that continues, as out, and these are things, and I discussed this in the book too. These are things you can actually measure, because we've been doing surveys for so long about church attendance and theological beliefs and church membership and all of these different attitudes and practices about religion. You can actually see it, like in the data, as Christianity recedes from life in America. I think these things will accelerate because pagan, not just the pagan ethos and the pagan way of thinking, but the activity of the spirits that are behind the pagan deities is fill those voids. There's power vacuums get filled in politics and in the spiritual world alike.
But there's no,
Right,
but
well,
there's
they're
no,
encouraging the void and then filling it.
what?
They're demons. They're encouraging the void, right? They're attacking and then filling the spaces
Yes.
that are
Mhm.
left empty.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Christ can beat him.
I think he already did. Well, I mean, the war's won.
Well,
We're fighting
that's
the
the
battle.
source. That's the source of our hope,
Right.
right? I don't spend a lot of time talking about hope, but there's there's every reason for hope, because has defeated them already, and because the pagan order was shattered by Christianity. Christianity is the only thing that's ever broken the pagan order anywhere in the world, and so it's receding in the West right now. But I think we maybe make a mistake too in thinking. And I, this is maybe more of a Protestant mistake than a Catholic mistake, but thinking, identifying the American experiment or the American Republic with the kingdom of God, right?
Oh, good, you said it.
Yeah.
that
The shining city on the hill.
America.
Wait, we're
Right.
gonna drag you out into the open as a Catholic. Stop talking to all these Protestants. And no, but this, I mean, this is the problem, right? It's one of the problems that we've talked about a lot in this context, of the degree to which, I mean, we've been talking about how power, the demons like power, right? And one of the most interesting things you said, and I'd like to talk about this because I haven't heard you talk about it in full anywhere, was the encampments that we've just been having are religious rituals, which we absolutely agree with, and we just did a episode about that.
Mhm.
But we've also, and my dog is now barking to prove that I'm right. What is he talking about? That the what happened on January 6th was also a religious thing. And
yeah, I agree with that.
These two, I don't know why he's barking. Oh, I bet because whenever people go up and down the stairs in our building, he goes bananas. That's gotta be it. Stop
throwing you off.
barking.
They're gone now.
Stop barking. You've scared them away. Good job.
You guys are safe now.
What are you going to do, corgis? Which actually does remind me that I was going to say, so the dog sacrifice thing, right? That people, this is we're going to come back to the January 6th and the encampments just a second, but with dogs, right? That women are giving up having babies, but they often have pets, right? And
no, I'm thinking. I know where you're going.
You don't know where I'm going with this, but you might know part of where I'm going with this, right?
I'm sorry.
Okay, so and one of the features of my having a dog is you have conversations in the dog park or the park nearby my home, so that I talk to people with dogs. And one of the things that people always say about the dog that they have is they've rescued it, right? They've rescued the dog from the pound or the shelter,
adopted
or something like that. And I'm like, well, I rescued mine at birth. Right? Because I bought him from a breeder, right? And for corgis to rescue them at birth means shut up. I'm going to go kill that dog. No, don't make jokes like that. I've lost a dog another time. To rescue a corgi at birth means you have to tell them not to dock their tail. Right? Because otherwise they're going to dock their, and so you have to tell the breeder, please don't. He's never done this. I have to tell the dog story. Please don't dock them so that he has his tail, right? Well, the first litter that we made the choice of the puppy from, all the puppies died. Like within a day of being born. One of them.
Oh no.
And so the next litter we got to pick a puppy and said, okay, we want that one. And they lived, right? And I'm like, that's what you're up against. Life, right? It's so interesting. We were surrounded by people, especially me, because I live in a giant city. We're surrounded by life. It's like, I don't know how we can take it for granted. Every single life is that puppy who didn't live, could die, right? And that's why I think the demons are like, they love it, right? They love taking that breath.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm ashamed that it took trying to get a dog with a tail really make me pay attention to that, because now you see people's babies, or you see children or something like that, and it's like every single one of them is even more precious than this dog I wanted to adopt so that she could have her tail. And that one died, right? And
Yeah.
I think sort of the horror that we're on the other side of is all the AI stuff, right? And this is where I think Lewis is actually definitely right in that hideous strength, where he ends up with the nice, brilliant acronym, the scientist and nice trying to engineer people, doing social engineering and things like that. But what they're wanting to do is what everybody's imagining. It's like, we're going to put our consciousnesses into robots and have no breath anymore.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to completely take our breath away. So the dog keeps barking, using his breath.
He can bark out now.
I don't know. He can keep going. Right. And think that's, and also his chaos, right? It's like, I don't want him doing that. I can't control him except for to train him and to work with him and to, actually he did need to, it's like that what people always want is, I want to be able to control my dog so that I can turn it off and on. Right. I want to be able to control this human being so I can turn him off and on. I can make them work. I can make them stop. Everybody's fantasizing about robots and AI. I'm like, do you understand what you're trying to get demon servants, but they're gonna rule you.
Everybody wants to control outcomes of their life, and that's not living. That's just
that's what the scientists of NICE, one of them, maybe it was Philostrato, had this long discourse on trees, how he wanted to replace all the trees because they were messy and they were organic and they had birds' nests in them, and he was explaining to the one of the protagonists, Mark, how he wanted to destroy all organic trees and then he just kept going, all organic matter, right? And destroy and bring an end to all like human copulation, which was messy and unpredictable, and he presented this whole vision of total control over nature, right? That he didn't put it in those terms, but that's what it was, and we see a parallel in this in Tolkien's Legendarium to Sauron, right? Who wants to control all of the thing he hates about Middle Earth is the disorder. It's the messiness of it all. It's the free will of all these people, pursuing their desires, and there's no order and there's no organization, and he hates that. He hates freedom, and he hates chaos, and he hates nature, and so this is I think the desire for AI and the desire for robots, or to upload our consciousness into a program, right, and to take our breath, as you say, Rachel, is a same kind of desire. It's diabolical, and it's being presented, though, much like the scientists of NICE, and much like Sauron was in his early incarnations. He once appeared as a beautiful, a beautiful angel, right? Which is what he was. He was an archangel. It's being presented to us now as this benign thing that will help humanity, and that will do all these wonderful things for us and cure diseases, and you can use AI so disabled people can see, and there's all these problems that we can't solve that AI will be able to solve for us, and it'll bring chaos, right? It's impossible to read these things and not see the parallels to what Lewis and Tolkien were talking about in their respective stories.
He must have been speculating about that type of science back then when they were writing then. Although I don't know. I don't have any knowledge.
I'm sure Tolkien could, he famously, and I'm sure you guys know this, he famously hated machines, right? He I don't know, maybe it's an apocryphal story, but when he was asked to record portions of The Lord of the Rings on a tape recorder, he didn't trust the tape recorder. He didn't want it to capture his voice. and he only agreed to do it after he prayed the Our Father in Gothic over the tape recorder.
He actually, I'm sure he would do that, but he had a car, right? He actually liked machines. He had a typewriter that he said I could dream of having a typewriter that could type Elvish. Yeah. So the thing is,
Well, he didn't like some machines. He hated chainsaws,
because he hated things
right?
that cut down trees, right?
Right.
I think, I mean,
But
this,
the reason he hated the tape recorder is because it was capturing his voice,
mhm,
and he saw that there was. I think he understood there's a spiritual threat to that. He understood that's a different kind of technology than a car or a typewriter, that were physical extensions of the human person, but something like a tape recording device is capturing something spiritual. It's capturing something sensory, that audio and visual technologies are different. They're not physical. They're like psychological, mental, and emotional, spiritual extensions of us in some
okay, now
ways.
you've stepped off into Marshall McLuhan territory, and
I was thinking,
we'll have to have you
yeah,
back to do
that's
that.
an interesting
No,
thought.
and the thing is, you're right, right? It's like there's a sidebar conversation here about the proper role of technology as opposed to the diabolical role of technology, because we are meant to be
Mhm.
artists and makers
Yes,
in the
right.
image. But the problem is the diabolical, and that's where we get trapped. But let's go back to the camps, right? And you said, I don't
Yes.
remember who you said this to, but I heard you say it's like the camps are religious rituals, and I'd love to hear you talk about that, because we've just been having one at Chicago, right? So it's
Yeah.
it's a moment and I think it's a massive religious ritual that's playing out on all of our campuses, and in much
Mhm.
of this with much of the same sort of fury that, for example, if you don't do the incense, you're in trouble. It has that same kind of divisive, polarizing quality that the Roman sacrifices did.
Right. You have to perform the public morality,
Right.
right? The official morality. And that's what it is nowadays. One of the things that struck me when these encampments kind of cropped up a couple of weeks ago is that, to the extent that any of these students talked to the media, or maybe, didn't realize they weren't supposed to, right? And so, we're answering questions from various media outlets and reporters. None of them seem to know any of what was going on between
Right.
Israel and Hamas. None of them seem to know of Israel and Palestinian conflict.
Mhm.
None of them seem to know that much even about what happened on October 7th. And they were so it wasn't as though they had like a specific demands about like that they needed some things to change. They didn't even know like what um, was being asked of the universities in a lot of cases, about divesting from Israeli-owned companies or whatever. They weren't even level.
Hmm.
So it wasn't like. So I thought, well, this isn't like a political movement, really. This is not being driven by like a political agenda necessarily, like in terms of like the students themselves don't, certainly the people funding these encampments and those fomenting them have an agenda, but the students themselves, it's not necessarily political. It's not even maybe even ideological. A lot of these kids were just out there. It was a religious
Right.
impulse, and part of it was in some ways like a very like. Now that I'm, now that we're all, being upfront about the fact that we're Catholics, it's an impulse, like to one of the elect, right?
They're
That
Oh,
protesters. Come on, they're Protestants.
yeah, very good. Yeah, exactly. They were they were in the good graces of like the ascendant like
Mm,
morality, right? And that they were performing the proper
right.
rituals to
Performative.
to show that they're one of the elect, right? And that was the purpose of it. And there really wasn't, there was no specific demands. It wasn't about changing policy or anything. It was about showing publicly that they were justified and that they were one of the elect and that they were uh, above reproach, not the enemy.
Right.
That seemed to be the overarching feeling I got about those protests.
Hmm.
We also had I got to go into the camp that was on campus here, although it was tinier than the one on UCLA campus, so it wasn't going in wasn't that big of an adventure, but that it was also the being together in the camp itself, right? That there was a ritual element to the participation that we've been thinking about is so going back to like now we've been making fun of the witches. They are responding to something that's not available to them otherwise, right? The women who make up the witchcraft practices, or the kids who are doing the encampments and such, I mean, talking about, Christianity's been receding from the public sphere. Well, ritual has receded from the public sphere in proper worship form. So, I'd say these were they're longing for some kind of, it's like the proper anthropological, effervescence of this ritual moment. And I think they're getting them from the camps, which is why they're not very coherent about purpose, because they're so wrapped up in we get to be together in this experience. And
that's their purpose.
Right. But it can be channeled in different ways. And this to me is what is, it's interesting to me in the parallel here with the camps that are happening right now. I know I have I have a large group of colleagues at the University of Chicago who are deeply in favor of these pro-Palestinian camps, right? Same colleagues, identical, exact same colleagues, will consider that what happened on January 6th was a horrible invasion. Right?
Well, it's the sacredest space. Of course,
it's the sacredest space, and they don't want Mr. Shaman doing his prayer in the Senate chamber, right?
They've invaded the temple.
It's sacred up until the point that like you have like a confirmation hearing for a conservative Supreme Court justice, and then it's not sacred. Then you can do whatever you want and disrupt it, and
defiling the temple.
Pound on the doors.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
But the thing is, I think both of them were responding to, there's a sort of, we're talking about this undercurrent of religiosity that's constantly available to either, be in, obedience to our Lord Jesus Christ and, serve him, or, be caught up in the sort of desire to belong to some other cult, right? And I, this is what's funny about when people talk about multiplicity of religions. It's like, no, it's just multiplicity of cult. Which one are you worshiping? Because the form of religiosity is pretty recognizable.
Yeah, and it's not just January 6th. I've been to, as part of my work as a journalist, been to many Trump rallies in many different places over the years in many different parts of the country, right? And there's a of like, it's not ritual exactly, but there's definitely a sense of like community and togetherness, and there's a celebratory sense, right, that you don't really get at rallies or events. I went to the most striking was a huge rally downtown Houston at the stadium, Houston. It's like 40,000 people there. It was insane. It was absolutely insane. And I was like, this is a mass political event on a scale and of a kind that it's almost foreign to the American experience. Like, this is something different. It was like a celebration and it was something more than just political was going on there, and something more than just political was going on at January 6th, just like something more than political is going on with these campus protests. And I totally agree. There's an innate desire, not just for ritual, but for the community and the sort of the solidarity of the cult that you get from participating in these rituals. And there is a kind of a ritual to going to a Trump rally, even if it's like inchoate and kind of like ill-defined, to the chants and the songs and the color palette and the pageantry, right? There is something cult-like about it, in the same way that, Rachel, you're describing going into this encampment and just sort of having like the feeling that they're really there. It's about being there together, right? It's the same thing with ardent Trump supporters. It's about being there together, and people go like to these rallies, like they're like itinerant Trump rowers. They go all around the country.
They're not following the
Like
dead
Grateful
anymore.
Dead.
It's not because they really believe in the MAGA agenda and they really want to close the border. That's not it at all. These are not like necessarily like politically savvy people. I've talked to hundreds of them over the years. A lot of them are they're going for the kind of the pageantry, they're going for the ritual, and they're going for the sense of community that you get by being in a like setting. And I'm not saying that in a derogatory way at Trump supporters. I'm not calling them members of a cult, but I'm saying that these outward expressions are their expressions of an innate desire that people have that we're being starved of as Christianity recedes, and people are going to find their placements for it.
Well, so how do we? We've gone through the slide of your vampire guy. We're going to go to now. How do we actually persuade people that Christ is the one that we should be doing those? I mean, they're big pilgrimage to Chartres right now. That Candace Owens has been tweeting about, marching with banners and singing songs and stuff like that. I mean, it's like, yes, all of these have the same shape, and this is where I think. I mean, we're gonna leave you bold. We hope, because this is our job, rousing people to go out, back out. Because this is me when I'm on the campus with the students and telling them in our prayer group, go be bold. How do what I have on screen now is the sacrifice, the Aztec sacrifice, which is ripping the hearts out and feeding the sun, and the deposition from the cross from the Passion of the Christ, right? They're both pretty bloody. That I think one challenge that Christianity has now is, isn't it just the same thing? Look, sacrifice. And sometimes I think Christianity is receding because Christian intellectuals have given up, and you can't. And two, Dorothy Sayers has said this at the same time as Lewis and Tolkien and everybody's writing. It's like, particularly in Anglophone context, we gave up teaching the doctrine. We gave up actually teaching Christianity, and we went for this sort of feel good stuff, which is shameful and embarrassing. We've got the young women who are doing self-help witchcraft because they want to have some kind of prayer life. Why not give them an actual like robust version of what Christianity is? And it's the, if we failed in nothing, this is on us as Christians. We failed in actually describing who it is we worship fundamentally, and what that means. What I see on the internet a lot, and I saw it a little bit in the tweeting about this episode, was, well, you're just as brutal and ruthless and cult-like as everybody else, you Christians.
Yeah.
They're wrong, but we need to be better at explaining why, because the forms can be similar, right? We can say that. It's like the form of the sacrifice, the crucifixion is a horrible scene, right? That's what Gibson wanted to show in the Passion of the Christ. It's like, can you get to the point to understand what Christ went through in the sacrifice?
The forms may be similar, but the fruits are different.
Exactly.
And the reason for the forms is also different, right? Going back to this idea that paganism, devilry, is an inversion of the Christian faith, and this related idea that that Tolkien talked about, that evil doesn't create, it can only ape, right? So that's what Satan has done. He's aped Christ and he's inverted the Christian religion, and that's what paganism is. And so that's why the forms look similar, right? But it's not because this, but the substance is very different, opposite, in fact. And I think two things. One, just as you say, we have to go back to teaching Christian doctrine and sort of take it seriously enough to talk about it publicly and study it ourselves and make sure that we understand it and be able to defend it. And give an answer for the hope that we have, as St. Peter says. So that's one part of it. And the other part of it is to take the ritual and all the pageantry and all the pomp and circumstance and take it out into the public square. Do a 3-day procession from Paris to Chartres. Right. Do the Eucharistic processions. Do Saints' Day processions through your town, even if it's just the people in your parish, right? And the other thing I'll say about this too, and I'm not just saying it because I'm Catholic, and I'm a Catholic convert too, so which means I'm one of those like jihadi Catholics. Is that
yes.
You see this happening?
Presbyterian
you see this happening.
To Catholicism. We're going to get preaching here.
You see this happening among Protestants too, and especially among evangelicals who have maybe less of an aversion than, say, like mainline Protestants do to adopting and grafting back into their sort of truncated version of Christianity ancient practices from the Catholic faith, like the observance of Lent, the observance of Advent. You're starting to see this more and more, that these Protestant Christian churches that are so disconnected from their own Protestant origins, right? They've forgotten why their Protestant forebears rejected these Catholic practices, right? They've forgotten the arguments against them, and so they're grafting the practices back in. And so there's a real opportunity to encourage them in that without even getting into doctrinal or theological debates. If an evangelical wants to practice Lent, he or she should hear nothing but encouragement. Do it, and do it hard.
So when, yeah. Well, our Ash Wednesday service was standing room only, and this is a church that can hold a couple of thousand. They weren't all Catholics, and I've heard this before for years. This is a very popular day for non-Catholics to go get ashes because they're getting something. They like the idea of a sacramental. I've got they're giving me something, and they're giving me something kind of important.
Yes,
right. It's very
something
attractive.
That's real, that you can see. That that it's not
tangible.
Just in their mind. Like I was raised non-denominational evangelical, and sort of the Manichaeanism of it just gets to you after a while, right? That like. That like it can't all be in your mind. It can't all be spirit. There's got to be something real. We're physical beings too, and so the pomp and the circumstance, the Saints' Day processions, the Ash Wednesday services, the breaking of the fast with like really great feasts. These things should be part of every Catholic community, and to the extent that they are, it will draw in other our Protestant brothers and sisters will be drawn to it inexorably, as they are being right now, for reasons that maybe they can't articulate. But that is a way to answer the religious hunger and the hunger for ritual, the hunger for religious rite that the devils are taking advantage of and deceiving people with in all these different ways. There's a chance for Catholics, and increasingly as well, are to draw in non-believers and draw in Protestants, and to show them that we have a source of riches. We have a treasury that is inexhaustible and is real and is so much more powerful than anything else that you're going to find out there in whatever campus protest or political rally you might go to. This is the real thing. And so that gives me great hope that the future of the church in the West is similar, but it will be much more potent than it has been for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
and we can go even stronger, right? So the next thing that I've been teaching my students about in my campus course this quarter is, I called it medieval Christian mythology, because I wanted to actually talk about the stories and like who it is and what is Christianity about. That we were looking at the movie and the deposition, and so much modern Christianity, and this comes out of the 19th century too, has been focused on the humanity of Jesus and the historical Jesus. And
Right.
we're permanently trapped in this, can we prove he was really this kind of person, and what color was he, and please, right?
Right.
The point being, and you were actually, John, you were actually already saying this earlier, because we were talking about the ancient Near Eastern understanding of God, and that in the Old Testament he's described as the El, the God Almighty, who has a son, right, who we understand is the second person and who becomes incarnate. And that I mean, it's funny that Christians have gotten embarrassed about this, because it's like, how do you give up actually talking about the Lord in majesty? And the images that I have on screen now, right, are for me the clincher in all of this. One is this little golden statue, which I only just learned about, but it's actually in what used to be our Oriental Institute at Chicago, but now is the Institute for the Study of Ancient Cultures, right? It's a cult statue from north of Jerusalem in antiquity, right? It's a little golden seated statue, which is literally what the kinds of divinities would have been in those ancient Near Eastern temples, but apparently it's identified as El, right? It's God. It's this image. Like, wait a minute, you have a statue, right? They're not supposed to have statues. Guess what? Yes, it's a little golden statue, right? And one of the sort of long-term things that I've been trying to show in my scholarship is Christians have been telling this story the same way all along. If you want to understand who that enthroned figure is, read Revelation. Because he's the enthroned Lord, the Lamb, the sacrifice is there in, heaven, being worshipped, seated on his rainbow throne, being worshipped by the four living creatures that say amen, and the angels that say holy, holy, holy. And what's interesting is, and this is like thinking about, like, how did the Christians convert all of those Germanic pagans? Well, they convinced that their God was real.
They talked,
right, and real at this metaphysical level. That it's wild that we've just kind of given up in modern Christianity. It's like, and I've heard you say this too, John, like, oh, we should be nice. It's like, whoever came up with that, right? That's obviously what Lewis was skitting with with his institute of what something whatever nice means, right? He's like, he's so right that we've abstracted out everything that's powerful in our truth, and we're reduced to being nice. We worship the Lord who created the world and who became incarnate in it and died and has been resurrected and ascended and now seated at the right hand and will come in glory. Like, who wants a better mythology than that? Woden, my goodness.
Yeah, I yeah.
Really?
Right.
Really?
No,
Woden?
yeah, it's a superior. It's a superior mythology, and it's that's why you mentioned earlier, Rachel, like some of the comments from earlier today of accusing, oh well, Christians just converted the pagans by the sword, and that can be the only explanation for people who deny the sort of glory and majesty of the faith, is that, well, you must have coerced people into doing it, right? Which is Christianity is one of the few religions in the world that doesn't coerce, that says it's actually impossible to coerce anyone into belief in Christ and salvation through Jesus Christ. And I think of to go back to Tolkien, and his commentaries on Beowulf. He famously translated and studied Beowulf and sort of had a revisionist take on how to understand what Beowulf was. And his and you all probably know all about this more than I do, but in broad terms, his take was that, or his understanding was that it was written by a Christian author
Right.
who was to sort of recently pagan peoples, trying to help them to make sense of their own mythology, and reveal the truth of Christianity to them using virtues and narrative devices that they would have understood. And and that, I think that sort of like is a great example of what you're talking about, that like there is this richness to the Christian story and a power to it it's richer and more powerful than anything in the pagan world, which again is just an ape of the Christian story.
Right.
It's a faint echo of the glory of Christendom, and confronted with it, the pagan world collapses every time, and even holdouts collapse eventually, and so we don't have we don't have a religion like Islam that was very clearly a militant religion that converted by the sword. It just didn't really convert; it just conquered. That's not the story of how Christianity spread across the world.
That's in their very text. So they don't even deny it. But it's often applied to Christians. They go, well, you must have done it too. It's like, no, where's your evidence? Right. I mean, it was illegal for 300 years, and then it was legal. But that was it. It was legal. It wasn't compelled.
Well, and in fact, in this is, I know, John, you had to go at a certain time, so I'll let you go. But I wanted to get to this point, that I have actually written in detail about the conversion of the Saxons under Charlemagne, and the responses out of that, which was, I mean, the ironically, in what we have of old German texts, there's a Old Saxon Heliand, which is a retelling of the Gospels in Old Saxon. And the challenge for the Christians in describing Christ to these pagan warriors was not. I mean, it's like, if in fact the way you convert people is coming in and beating them in battle, well, they did. Right? But the pagan missionaries are not trying to do that. They're trying to convince them that, yes, this our God died for us. That makes no sense whatsoever to Woden worshipers. They're like, what? Right. Are you nuts?
That's weakness.
That's
why
weakness.
Why would I worship that?
Right. Why would they ever worship that? I mean, it's like, it's ironic that in fact what we end up with is not a battle god in those terms, but the one who loved us. And that is, I mean, both what I have now on screen is the earliest of the monumental crucifixes that we have from Saxony. So this great Garrow cross, and a feather version from the Aztec converts of the Mass of St. Gregory, where he's meditating on the Man of Sorrows, right? It's like the challenge of Christianity is that, guess what? Christ takes away all those baby deaths. It takes away all. Christ does not demand that you kill your children. He says, have them baptized so they're protected from the devil, and feed them.
Yeah, right. And again, to the inversion of Christianity, that and their altars to feed their gods, and Christians went to theirs to be fed by their God. And the other point about like the Saxons, like if it was just a matter of conquering them, then why the hell did it take so long, right?
Yes.
It was a very long process to convert the Saxons to Christianity, and that stands in stark contrast to how long it the Muslims to convert the areas they converted, because they just militarily conquered and basically said, you convert or die, or you accept dimitude or you die. And so, yes, Islam spread very quickly because it was a religion of conquest, and it took Christianity longer because it was not a religion of conquest. And Paul Johnson, in his single volume History of Christianity, which I think came out in the 70s, great book, but he talks about the creativity and sort of the ingenuity that the Catholic Church had in in talking to and presenting the gospel to the pagan peoples of Northern Europe,
Right.
and that they were able to convey the gospel message to them in a way that permanently transformed those cultures, and they're in a way that the church was not as creative or innovative. Innovative is the wrong word, but just not as creative and not as willing to take in elements of these new cultures that the church would encounter 500 years later in sort of in the age of exploration. And so they didn't have the same kind of success that they had in Europe when they went to the Far East or when they went to the New World, and that the process of conversion in those places was different. Mm-hmm. And not as complete as it was in Europe, but it was because of what you're saying there, Rachel, that they were able to totally transform and redeem these pagan cultures and reveal to these people that the gods, the little gods that they had, were just echoes or shadows of the true God, and that the true God was more powerful than all of their lesser gods were. So
we win.
So we win. The end.
in a good way.
Yeah.
Well, so you did say you needed to stop at this time. So do you have any last? After that was beautiful, and I was going to end with Chesterton saying, we'll not end with where we know where paganism actually ended. In Christianity.
Yes.
Right.
That's right.
Conversion.
In conversion.
That's right. So people have accused me of being too pessimistic and too doom and gloom, but I actually feel very hopeful about this. And if it doesn't come across in the book, then that's a failure on my part. It's my first book, so maybe
sequel.
I'll do better the next time around. But I think there's great reason to have hope. And we didn't get into this, and maybe we can talk about this another time. But there's not a lot of reason to hope if you repose your hope in an American religion, in a religion of politics.
Yeah.
Then there's no reason to hope. That to me is true despair. But if you repose your hope in the strength of the gospel and the strength of Christ's church and its power to convert peoples and to transform cultures, don't need America is our home, and I love America, and I love my country, and I want it to do well, and I want people to prosper, and I want peace in my homeland. But if we're not to have peace, let's at least have the truth. So I think there's reason to hope that the truth will survive in this land among our people, and it may be a smaller group of people, but they'll be more faithful and they'll be more potent. And from that seed, from that sort of core of a faithful Christian people, that is the beginning of a future conquest of pagan America. And it's the same gospel reality. It's the same God that conquered the pagan empires of old will conquer the pagan empires of our time as well. And we may not live to see it, but that's not reason to hope. And that's not reason to have certainty in the hope that we have as Christians. So,
amen.
Amen.
So thank you for having me on and talking with me. I really enjoyed it.
And thank you for spending some time with us to really wrestle with these twinnings. We've read a lot of Girard's mimetic thesis, and it seemed to me that you were able to show in your book really well that how these things twin out, and we need to be able to tell, as you said, the fruits is where we'll know for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. Well,
thank you for.
Well, thank you.
Please.
Let's do it again.
We'll have you back when you tell us you'd like to again. Okay.
Very good.
Thanks for
coming. God bless.
God bless. Good night.